Northern Hemisphere Team of the Year, folks. We've already looked at the South yesterday. We picked a 23-man squad, plus a coach, plus some honourable mentions from the South. How are things looking from the teams up north? We'll go through my picks from a Northern Hemisphere Team of the Year, as it's just my picks. So take that for what it's worth, and you guys let us know your thoughts on who you would have in the Team of the Year. It's a little bit harder with the North. I deliberately left these guys second because the Six Nations is so long ago that it's hard to remember some of the guys who had cracking Six Nations, then a big international gap, and then we get into all the kind of Rugby World Cup warm-up games and the World Cup itself. So I find this one harder. Bit of a test of the memory, bit of a test of the old stats, records and whatnot, but we'll go through them. You guys let us know your thoughts. I'm going to start with a loose head prop from France, Cyril Bay. Pretty sure he made World Rugby's Dream Team of the Year. He's a great loose head prop. He's a great scrummager. He is a great offloader. He scored 2 tries in the Rugby World Cup quarterfinal. Sadly for his boys, it wasn't enough. I was a little bit torn with this World Cup because I am from the South, so there's kind of a regional loyalty here, but it would have been nice to see a Northern Hemisphere team break the record, I guess. Not to be for the French at home, they were heavily favoured, but Cyril Byman is a great player. I think he's about 30, so he's probably still got at least one good Rugby World Cup cycle in him before he kind of, Father Time kind of catches up with him, but he's a cracking asset to that French squad, and one of the best in the business, absolutely. I give the best of the Southern Hemisphere a for sure run for his money. Tie head prop, I'm going to go with Tyke Furlong. I'm pretty sure he also made World Rugby's Team of the Year. It's tough though, because I don't actually think we saw peak Tyke Furlong in 2023. I think we've seen peak Tyke Furlong in years gone by. He's still a great scrummager, even if he's not quite at 100%. He's still great around the park, but I do feel like there's other years when he's genuinely been snubbed for Player of the Year, I believe. Like the year Johnny Sexton won it, I think he was right up there. Props never get nominated, but Tyke Furlong is one of those kind of generational talents at tie head prop. And then Dan Sheehan kind of ran his way into that hooker jersey in the last kind of couple of years for Ireland, didn't he? It's been very competitive with the likes of Rob Herring and Ronan Kelleher competing for that job in Ireland, but Dan Sheehan probably has the best running game of any hooker. Samasone Takiaho was pretty good down here in NZ at ball carrying and tackle busting, but Dan Sheehan is a proper X-Factor guy, and anytime he's on the park, Ireland look certainly a fair bit more dangerous. So a couple of Irish and a French player, maybe there's no huge surprises there. Maybe a little bit of a surprise in the old locks. Locks, I think, were the absolute hardest pick. These were the last 2 guys I picked in this side. I've gone with Maro Itoje, and people hate Maro Itoje. I think it's probably because he's from England, and because he plays for Saracens, and because he can give people a little bit of niggle. He has, he can get on people's nerves. Not as much as some others, but people don't like Maro Itoje, but you got to admit he's a good player. I went back and booted up the old Six Nations stats from the year gone by. Top guy for winning turnovers in the Six Nations. That's what I think of when I think Maro Itoje. Absolutely great defensive player. He had the second most tackles of any England player at that Rugby World Cup. So proper defensive powerhouse. Wins lineouts. And again, maybe like Tyke Furlong, I don't know if that's peak Maro Itoje. Getting back there, like in that Samoa game, I think he's key. I don't think England win that Samoa game without Maro Itoje doing what he does. But yeah, one of the best defensive players ever. Even though if he's not going to win any kind of popularity contests around the world. And then next to him, I went with Thibaut Flamand, who's maybe, again, a little bit of a left field pick. It's a tough one because my gut was going James Ryan from Ireland, but I don't think he had a big fitness cloud over him in the Rugby World Cup, and I don't think we saw peak James Ryan. He obviously didn't make the quarterfinal with injury, James Ryan. But Flamand kind of came into the side as that beefier of the 2 locks alongside Cameron Woki once we lost Willemse from the French squad. Like Flamand kind of usually traded places with Woki as the loose head lock, but he had to play tight head lock once Willemse was out of that spot, and he kind of supplanted Taufa Funua into that spot. And he's a big guy. Like he's 2.03 meters, which is I think about the same height as Ebenezer. He's a similar weight to Ebenezer. So he's a big unit, and he is absolutely skilled as they come. Like lineouts won, lineouts stolen, high tackle rates, and a great return for meters per carry for a lock. He is phenomenally talented at running the ball. Most locks get just over a meter per carry. They're usually just ahead of the props because they're such rangy fellas. It's hard for them to get low enough to get over the advantage line at times. Not so Thibaut Flamont. He's a bit of a freak athlete. Him and Woki are a great duo, but offensively minded lock and a defensively minded lock. Those are the two guys I've gone for. But as I said, I found locks the hardest pick for the North this year. Back row, chock full of talent. Absolutely. I think both North and South, you leave out more guys than you can pick. Caelan Doris at number 6. For the Six Nations, he was virtually unplayable. When Ireland went to that Grand Slam, he was just in unbelievable form. Rugby World Cup, he still finishes Ireland's top tackler. I think he scored 4 tries throughout the year. Genuinely did a bit of everything. Wins lineouts, bust tackles, leg drive, gets over the advantage line. Phenomenal player, generational talent. Charles Olivant from France, likewise for his team, another kind of generational talent. Scored a couple of tries at the World Cup. He makes tackles, he wins line-out ball, he gets clean breaks. Like he's got a real nose for some space for a loose forward, which is not all that common. And then Gregory Aldred, talk about guys who've got the most work rate. You can basically put money on him to have more carries than anybody else in that French side because he's just an absolute workhorse. Sure enough, he finishes the World Cup as France's top ball carrier. He's usually one of the top tacklers. He busts tackles. Those guys are all they're all kind of similar age, aren't they? They're all very, very high energy, high work rate, high skill players, which is not something you always see. They're a little bit overshadowed by what Adi Savi is doing, but none of those 3 guys are that far off the pace. They're all kind of much of a muchness, aren't they? Very, very talented guys. Back replacements, forward replacements. I've chucked in the French hooker Piazzo Malvaca. He shared the role with Marchand for much of the year, but with Marchand's injury, Piazzo had to step up, and I think he did. He scored 3 tries in the Rugby World Cup, great in the loose. Lineout tends to operate pretty well. He's a very, very good guy to be able to step up in a pinch. Andrew Porter, maybe a bit of a controversial one because his penalty count, he's maybe overtaken Maro Itoje as the guy you look at and go, well, he's good, but he gives away too many penalties. But he's... I watched the game with Leinster the other day where he literally gave away a penalty, won a penalty, gave away a penalty, won a penalty. That's just what he does at the minute. Anyway, great at the breakdown, generally a pretty good scrummager. Sometimes he gets pinged by the refs, but he's alongside Tariq Furlong, one of the better props in World Rugby. And then reserve tight head prop gone with the Frenchman Uini Antonio. Crazy scrum skills, scored a try this year. There's not many tight heads scrummaging wise who are up there with Antonio. Obviously Franz Malherbe is a heck of a scrummager from South Africa, but Antonio with that big frame of his, and has he been talked into not retiring from Test Rugby? I kind of have to wait and see, but yeah, man, he's a proper unit. I've also gone with a few of the guys who are unrepresented yet, and he's going to be controversial, I know, because he's from Italy. Federico Ruzza. Plays for a team that usually loses, so I don't think he gets the credit that he deserves. He is unbelievably skilled in the air. He is a very, very reliable lineout option. I can't remember how many lineouts he won in the Six Nations. It was something like 39 or something stupid. Really, really high. He's so athletic in the air. In the Six Nations, I think he was 55 out of 56 tackles. And in the World Cup, he was 41 out of 43. And he gets run meters. He is a bloody stats dream. I feel like if he plays for a better team, he gets more credit. But because he plays for Italy, he doesn't get that much. I love watching Federico Ruzza. Jack Morgan from Wales, one of the best around. Genuinely all-round skill player. He gets try assists, he gets tries, he puts kicks in for 50-22s, he tackles hard, he carries. He was the co-captain for this Welsh squad in a team which wasn't supposed to do that well, but he absolutely looked the part. And then I've gone with an extra forwards. I've only got 2 backs on the bench. I've gone with Ben Earl, largely because of his World Cup performance, man. I was a little bit questioning of the Steve Borthwick selection when they selected kind of Billy V as the only specialist 8. But then Ben Earl was just unbelievable in that England back row. He finishes England's top carrier at the World Cup, top tackler at the World Cup, most clean breaks at the World Cup for England. Like, he's unbelievable. Again, he plays for Surrey, so he's probably not the most popular of guys, but bloody hell, he had an incredible World Cup. So there you go. That's your forward replacements and your starting forwards too. Backs wise, number 9 is going to be pretty easy. I'll probably chuck him in the thumbnail. Antoine Dupont. Maybe he wasn't even at his best at the World Cup. Wasn't he player of the Six Nations? I think he was. 4 try assists at the Six Nations. He got a try at the World Cup. He had the most carries for backs at the World Cup. Maybe you could argue he was trying to do a little bit too much himself and a little bit of desperation. Obviously came back from that facial injury. You got to wonder if that was affecting his game or not. But first equal for offloads at the World Cup. He's got an unbelievable skill set. I say it every time we talk about him, is that like he's going to be a player in 20 years from now that you tell kids about, like, oh, back in my day, there was this guy Dupont, and they'll sit there nodding, kind of switching off, and then you'll have to stick the highlights on to show some of what that guy could do, because he is just unbelievable. Yeah, he's the Dan Carter of his country's generation, man. So Antoine Dupont, unbelievable player, and as I said, I don't even think he was at his best at the World Cup after the injury anyway, but he got one game after the injury. Anyway, number 10, you love him or you hate him, Finn Russell. Some people think he's the best 10 in the world. Other people think he is the most exaggerated, what do you want to call it, just overhyped, doesn't deliver in the big games kind of player. But I love watching him. What can I say? He had 4 try assists in the Six Nations, which was the same as Romain Ntamack, and people rave about Ntamack. So I reckon Finn Russell's pretty good. He was one of Scotland's top ball carriers. You could argue that Scotland kind of struggled in their 2 big games at the World Cup and the really tough ball to unlock the defences of Ireland and especially South Africa. But I've seen him playing for Bath recently. He's looking the business. Finn Russell, he's even kicking goals now. Didn't know he used to have to do that back in the day, but yeah, I reckon he's one of the better players around. Sorry, Johnny. Midfield, though, back to an Irish way. Bundy Aki had kind of like when I was talking about Ben Earl, just peaking at the World Cup. Bundy Aki, that's the best I've ever seen him play, and I've been watching him for a bloody long time, since way back his way when he was with the Chiefs. Unbelievable, like virtually unplayable at the World Cup. Top Irish guy for clean breaks at the World Cup, scored 5 tries, second most for carries. He was just in the form of his life. It sucked to see him go out when he went out, even though it was my team that put them out. But man, you just felt like he was destined for something a bit more the way he was playing. And Gary Ringrose alongside him. I've always liked Gary Ringrose. I picked him for my team of the year for the Northern Hemisphere, I want to say 3 or 4 years ago. And I still remember some guy was like, he's not even the best midfielder in Ireland, let alone, the Northern Hemisphere. He's bloody good, man. People have told me, though, it's because when he was coming through the ranks, people were kind of saying he's the next O'Driscoll, so the hype was too much, so he didn't kind of live up to being the embodiment of the new Brian O'Driscoll thing, but he's a bloody good player, man. Second in Ireland for clean breaks at the World Cup. Very elusive running game. Scored tries, set up tries. He's just a real handful of a player. I like watching him play. I reckon he's the kind of consummate midfielder. Perfect 13, and he could even play on the wing in a pinch. So there you go. Gary Ringrose at 13. Left wing, I've got another Scottish player, Big Duhan van der Merwe. I feel like he's another one who people either love or they hate. He sometimes gets accused of being a bit of a flat track bully. Disappears in the big games, struggles to find the kind of same punch through. But, I mean, I think he had 35 defenders beaten in the Six Nations this year, which was breaking his own record. So he is a tank of a man in a lot of games. Not every game, maybe a bit like John Olomu in that regard, and that, sometimes he was unplayable and sometimes he was kept a bit quiet. I think he had 7 tries in 11 games, which is a heck of a return. He's a very, very, very big, quick man. He's got very quick feet for a guy that size. So, Duhan van der Merwe. And then right wing, you got to go Damien Penaud. 6 tries at the World Cup. You got to think he would have been pushing the 8 or 9 record if he had managed to get past the quarterfinals. He scored 2 against Australia before the World Cup. He scored 1 against Scotland at the World Cup before the World Cup started. He scored 5 in the Six Nations. He's just been an absolute try finisher. Yeah, had a career year for sure. Damien Penaud, been unbelievable. And then in his club, He's on a stupid, huge try-scoring run as well since he's moved clubs. So Damian Peña, unbelievable. And then fullback, I went with Hugo Keenan. It was probably between him and Ramos, but I reckon Hugo Keenan is kind of slightly underrated somehow, despite the fact that he plays for a Grand Slam winning Irish side and plays for the Leinster, who are pretty good. So Hugo Keenan, I mean, he's safe as houses under the high ball most of the time. I will admit, I haven't got stats on it, but I feel like he's been a little bit less than his usual, 90+% self or whatever it is for his high ball work. But he's bloody good under the high ball, and he's elusively fast. Like, he doesn't look like he's moving that quick, but he is. 3 tries at the World Cup, second top Irish guy for carries at the World Cup. Very, very busy player. So he is my fullback. I reckon he's a great player. A couple of players on the bench. I've gone with Jamison Gibson Parks, who a specialist 9 on the bench, which is something I didn't do for the Southern Hemisphere team. If you want to check out that video, I'll put a link somewhere. But high-speed recycle ball, a key part of why that Irish side is able to do what they do. And then 23, Thomas Ramos. I mentioned him earlier. Great attack, great goal kicking, good link-up man. Genuinely one of the better players in 2023. The fact that he's on the bench is already pretty tough on him because he had a pretty bloody good year. And a coach, I had to go with Andy Farrell. I'm pleased to see the Irish have extended him for one more World Cup cycle. I do reckon he is one of the most cool, kind of calm and collected coaches out there. He's got a plan. He sticks to it. He's not easily rattled. When they came to New Zealand last year and lost their opening game in that tour in New Zealand, he didn't just chop and change the side. He's very, very patient with his players. He believes in his players. He doesn't just rotate players for the sake of rotation, but he's still managing to kind of build depth as well. I reckon he's doing a great job. So we'll see how he's able to transition the side with some of the guys getting to their kind of either retirement age, like Sexton already retired, or some of the guys kind of getting into their early to mid-30s. But yeah, Andy Farrell, pretty good. Honourable mentions, goodness me, who have I snubbed? Loads of guys. That's the nature of the beast when you pick a team of the year. James Ryan, like I mentioned, I don't think he was 100% in the latter half of the year. When he is, I think he makes this team most of the time. He's an absolute workhorse. Johnny Sexton, you could easily pick him ahead of Finn Russell. He'd be a lot more sensible choice. You don't always go with sensible, though, when you're picking these things. Mac Hansen was unbelievable as well on the Irish wing. For Scotland, Darcy Graham was also one of my favourite wingers out on that right wing. If not for Damian Peña, maybe he sneaks in there. The midfield of Tuipulotu and Jones, Rory Darge has been phenomenal. Those guys have all been great. Georgia, David Niniashvili is a proper attacking weapon. Love watching that guy play. And then Tornik Jalagonia, absolute defensive machine at the World Cup. He was phenomenal. Nobody talked about him really because they were all worried about Niniashvili and all the flashy stuff, but Jalagonia was fantastic. Rafael Storti from Portugal also lit up the World Cup with his attacking play. For Japan, I chucked them in with the Northern Hemisphere this time because that is geographically correct, even if they are more leaning towards Southern Hemisphere in terms of the teams they play and whatnot. Amato Fakatawa, the lock loose forward, was phenomenal. Michael Leach, the veteran, also great. I mean, Amato Fakatawa's try-scoring record's great for a guy in his position. Romania had a pretty tough time at the World Cup, but Adrian Motok was a bit of a tackling machine. Wales, you're underrepresented. They had a bit of a changing of the guard, so it's a bit harder for a team of the year, but Talupe Faletau is unbelievably unlucky to miss out because he had a great year. Will Rowlands is one of those guys that I like, even if he's not that popular. Liam Williams at fullback I thought was also very dangerous. France, Gal Fiku was very dangerous. The fact that he misses out to Ringrose is also a controversial one. Likewise, Jonathan Danty, he was phenomenal. Francois Cross, absolute tackling machine for France. Capuozzo for Italy is also dangerous at the back. Brex, maybe not the quickest midfielder, but I thought he had a really effective year in that midfield. Zuliani from the bench for Italy was, likewise very dangerous. I think he probably deserved a wee start. Ollie Chesham for England was great alongside Itoje. Owen Farrell finished top point scorer of the World Cup, but people still probably won't give him a heck of a lot of credit for it. But goodness gracious me. There's more. I could go on and on for days. Oh, I didn't include the Portugal flag. Sorry, Portugal. I should have put you up here. Misplaced it. But yes. You guys let us know your thoughts on your team of the year. If you were picking a northern team, if you've seen the southern team, How do you reckon those two teams compare? Which hemisphere do you reckon edges which area? Front row, locks, loose forwards, kind of halfbacks and whatnot, outside backs? Or are they kind of pretty even? Because it does feel like there's a nice balance between North and South at the moment. Cheers to all the folks who've been doing Buy Me a Beer recently. If you want to buy me a beer, I'm sweating buckets here. I could use a cold beer down in the description. And if you've checked out, speaking of beer, my beer museum video in China, I did that in a Leinster jersey. I'll put that up there or down there. That was something different. That was 2 Cents on Tour, which is another channel run by yours truly. Take care of yourselves, folks. Enjoy your holidays if you're having them. You guys, have a cold beer or something warm to warm you up if you're up in the north, which you probably are watching this video. But yes, I'll stop rambling. You guys take care. Talk to you again soon. See you later.